Jack Coe was the evangelist who challenged hell and commanded miracles. He stood under canvas tents and dared sickness to leave, dared demons to flee, and dared people to believe without apology. Loved by thousands, feared by critics, and scrutinized by the media, Jack Coe preached a kind of faith that refused to be polite, quiet, or safe. Blind eyes opened, crutches were abandoned, and controversy followed him everywhere he went. But behind the miracles and the bold declarations was a man driven by urgency, conviction, and a dangerous question. What if we truly believed God meant what he said? His life ignited revival, sparked outrage, and left behind a legacy the church still wrestles with today. Before we dive into this powerful story of faith, fire, and consequence, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves deep, thought-provoking Christian history. Now, let's step into the extraordinary life of Jack Coe. In the mid-20th century, when America was torn between post-war optimism and deep spiritual hunger, one man stood on dusty platforms and said words few preachers dared to speak aloud. "I dare you to doubt." Jack Coe was not polished. He was not cautious. He was not interested in respectable religion. He was consumed by one burning conviction that the Jesus of the Gospels was still alive, still powerful, and still willing to confront sickness, demons, and despair head-on. To Jack Coe, doubt was not intellectual honesty. It was a thief robbing believers of what God had already promised. And so he challenged it publicly, relentlessly, and without apology. Jack Coe emerged during the height of the post-World War II healing revival, a movement that shook churches, cities, and entire denominations. Tent meetings drew tens of thousands. Newspapers reported both miracles and controversies. Critics called the evangelists dangerous fanatics. Followers called them men sent by God. In the center of this storm stood Jack Coe, bold, confrontational, and utterly convinced that compromise was the enemy of faith. He did not merely preach sermons. He declared war on sickness, fear, and unbelief. To many, he seemed reckless. To others, he was proof that the book of Acts had not ended. Born in 1918 in Oklahoma, Jack Coe grew up in a world shaped by hardship. The Great Depression carved resilience into his bones, and early struggles taught him that survival demanded grit. Yet his fiercest battles were not economic, they were spiritual. Like many revivalists of his era, Coe's early ministry was marked by frustration, failure, and searching. He wanted results, not emotional religion, not polite sermons, but visible demonstrations of God's power. For years, those results seemed elusive. Churches invited him, then quietly stopped calling. The miracles he read about in Scripture felt distant from the reality he faced on the road. Everything changed when Coe encountered the message that would define his life: uncompromising faith in a miracle-working God. Influenced by the healing evangelists who were reshaping American Christianity, he became convinced that doubt was not a neutral position, it was a spiritual barrier. To Coe, faith was not merely believing God could heal. It was believing he would. This conviction transformed his preaching style. Gone were cautious phrases and theological hedging. In their place came direct commands, sharp rebukes of unbelief, and an atmosphere charged with expectancy. By the late 1940s, Jack Coe's ministry exploded. His tent crusades became massive operations, some seating over 10,000 people night after night. Stretchers, crutches, wheelchairs, and medical braces lined the front of his meetings. Coe would preach with urgency, pacing the platform like a man racing against time. He spoke as if heaven and hell were leaning in to listen. Then came the altar calls, moments that would define his legacy and fuel endless controversy. Coe did not gently pray and wait. He commanded sickness to leave. He told the blind to open their eyes, the deaf to hear, the paralyzed to walk. And many did. Testimonies poured in, tumors vanished, deaf ears opened. Those who had been carried into the tent walked out on their own. For supporters, These were undeniable signs of God's power. For skeptics, they were either exaggerated, staged, or dangerously misleading. Jack Coe seemed unfazed by criticism. In fact, he leaned into it. If you don't believe, he would say, don't come. But if you come, don't doubt. His message was confrontational by design. He believed miracles demanded an atmosphere where faith was protected and unbelief was expelled. This attitude brought him into direct conflict with both secular authorities and religious leaders. Doctors questioned his claims. Pastors warned their congregations to stay away. Journalists followed his meetings, waiting for a scandal. Yet the crowds only grew. People came not for theology, but for hope. They came with children crippled from birth, with diseases medicine had failed to cure, with pain that had outlasted prayer after prayer. Jack Coe offered them something radical: certainty. Not sympathy, not spiritual consolation, but the audacious promise that God would act now. Perhaps nothing illustrates Coe's fearless approach more than his public challenges. He dared medical science to examine healings. He dared critics to bring the sick. He dared believers to trust God completely. And most famously, he dared people to doubt, knowing full well that such language would ignite outrage. To Coe, the stakes were too high for polite religion. Eternity, he believed, was on the line. Sickness was not just a physical condition. It was an enemy to be confronted in the name of Jesus. Yet beneath the bravado was a man under immense pressure. The demands of constant travel, massive crowds, and relentless criticism took a toll. The very intensity that fueled his ministry also pushed his body and spirit to the edge. Jack Coe lived fast, preached hard, and burned brightly. He seemed driven by the sense that his time was shorthand in many ways. It was. His ministry would reach astonishing heights, face devastating challenges, and end far sooner than anyone expected. Jack Coe's ministry was not built merely on charisma or dramatic storytelling. It was driven by a theology that left little room for hesitation. At the heart of his message was a radical idea for his time: that God's promises were not symbolic, postponed, or selective. They were immediate, literal, and available to anyone willing to believe without compromise. Coe did not see faith as a gentle hope or an inner feeling. To him, faith was an act of war, an aggressive refusal to accept anything less than what Scripture declared. This conviction shaped every sermon he preached and every miracle he pursued. Central to Coe's theology was the belief that doubt was not harmless. He taught that doubt actively neutralized faith and blocked divine power. While many preachers spoke of faith as trust mixed with humility, Coe spoke of it as certainty mixed with action. He rejected phrases like "if it be thy will" when praying for the sick, arguing that God's will was already revealed in the healing ministry of Jesus. In his view, Jesus never told the sick to wait, suffer, or accept their condition. He healed them. Therefore, Coe insisted, believers had no excuse to lower their expectations. This belief made his meetings intense and, at times, uncomfortable. Jack Coe did not cater to passive spectators. He demanded participation. When he preached, he called people to make decisions not tomorrow, not after counseling, but in that moment. He often told the sick to throw away crutches, remove braces, or attempt movements they had been unable to do for years. Critics called this reckless. Coe called it faith in action. To him, obedience to God's word unlocked miracles, while hesitation allowed fear to dominate. His theology also emphasized spiritual authority. Coe believed that sickness, like sin, was part of the curse Christ defeated on the cross. He preached that believers were not meant to beg God for a healing, but to enforce Christ's victory over the works of darkness. This language was confrontational and militaristic. He spoke of commanding sickness to leave and challenging the devil openly. In an era when many churches preferred gentler language, Coe's tone sounded shocking, yet for thousands who felt powerless against disease, his message restored a sense of agency. The tent meetings themselves reflected this theology. They were not designed to be comfortable or refined. They were arenas of confrontation. Night after night, Coe would build expectation through preaching, testimonies, and bold declarations. He created an atmosphere where miracles were not the exception, but the expectation. When healings occurred, he highlighted them immediately, sometimes stopping the service to bring people onto the platform. These moments were not simply celebrations, they were teaching tools. Coe wanted the crowd to see faith in motion. However, this uncompromising approach came at a cost. Medical professionals began to challenge his claims publicly. Some accused him of encouraging people to abandon treatment prematurely. Journalists scrutinized his crusades, looking for inconsistencies or failed healings. Religious leaders criticized what they saw as arrogance and spiritual abuse. They argued that Coe placed unbearable pressure on the sick, implying that failure to receive healing was their fault for lacking faith. Jack Coe rejected these accusations outright. In his mind, the greater cruelty was telling suffering people to accept their condition when God had promised deliverance. One of the most defining moments of Coe's career came when his theology collided directly with the legal system. In 1956, he was arrested in Miami, Florida, accused of practicing medicine without a license after praying for a child with polio. The case drew national attention and intensified the debate around divine healing. To his supporters, Coe was being persecuted for his faith. To his critics, he was finally being held accountable. Jack Coe did not retreat. Even in court, he defended his beliefs passionately, declaring that he was obeying God, not medical institutions. Although the charges were eventually dropped, the incident left a mark. It exposed the fragile line Coe walked between faith and public responsibility. Yet instead of softening his message, he doubled down. He preached even more boldly, warning that fear of man was one of the greatest enemies of God's power. His meetings grew larger, his language sharper, and his reputation more polarizing. People did not attend the Jack Coe crusade out of curiosity. They came either desperate for a miracle or determined to prove him wrong. Behind the scenes, the pressure was relentless. Maintaining massive crusades required enormous physical stamina and emotional resilience. Coe preached night after night, often ignoring exhaustion and illness. He believed slowing down was a sign of unbelief. Friends and associates later recalled that he lived as if he were racing against an invisible clock. His theology did not allow space for weakness, not in doctrine and not in himself. This internal tension would later have devastating consequences. Yet despite the controversies, the impact of his message was undeniable. Jack Coe helped reshape how a generation viewed faith, prayer, and the supernatural. He challenged the idea that miracles belonged only to biblical history or distant mission fields. For better or worse, he forced Christianity to confront a dangerous question. What if we truly believed God meant what he said? His refusal to apologize for faith pushed the conversation into uncomfortable territory, where excuses fell away and expectations rose. As we move into the next section, we will explore the miracles that made Jack Coe a household name, the testimonies that inspired hope, the stories that sparked outrage, and the moments that convinced thousands that hell itself was being challenged under those canvas tents. This is where belief met evidence, and where Jack Coe's daring theology took visible form. By the early 1950s, Jack Coe was no longer just another traveling evangelist. He was a national phenomenon. His tent crusades had become events people planned their lives around. Families traveled 4 miles, sometimes days, carrying loved ones who had exhausted every medical option available. Newspapers followed him from city to city, radio stations debated him, and churches either endorsed him passionately or warned their members to stay far away. What set Jack Coe apart was not merely his preaching, but the claims that followed him everywhere, claims of miracles, so dramatic they demanded attention. Night after night, testimonies poured in. People testified of deaf ears opening instantly, of cripples rising from wheelchairs, of tumors disappearing under the heat of the platform lights. Children who had never walked before were carried onto the stage and walked back down under their own power. Coe encouraged these testimonies publicly, believing they glorified God and strengthened faith. He often said that miracles were not meant to be hidden, but displayed as evidence that Jesus Christ was still alive and active. One of the most striking aspects of Coe's meetings was the visible aftermath. Piles of discarded crutches, braces, and canes were sometimes stacked near the platform, symbols of victory. These objects became silent witnesses to what Coe proclaimed from the pulpit. To believers, they were sacred trophies. To skeptics, they were props waiting to be debunked. The tension between faith and doubt grew thicker with every crusade. Media scrutiny intensified as Coe's fame grew. Journalists attended his meetings not to worship, but to investigate. Some wrote cautiously respectful accounts, acknowledging that something unusual was happening even as they could not explain it. Others arrived determined to expose fraud. Reporters interviewed healed individuals days or weeks later, searching for relapses. Doctors were quoted questioning diagnoses. Headlines alternated between awe and accusation. Jack Coe responded to this scrutiny with defiance rather than diplomacy. He welcomed investigations, confident that genuine miracles would withstand examination. Yet not every story was clean or simple. Some individuals who claimed healing later reported that symptoms returned. Critics seized on these cases, arguing that emotional excitement and mass suggestion played a role. They accused Coe of exploiting vulnerable people, of offering false hope wrapped in religious fervor. Supporters countered that faith was a journey, not a moment, and that fear and unbelief could reverse what God had done. Jack Coe himself addressed this tension bluntly. He taught that miracles had to be maintained by continued faith, a statement that both inspired commitment and intensified controversy. One particularly famous healing involved individuals who had been officially declared incurable. When such cases appeared successful, they fueled Coe's reputation as a man who truly challenged hell. He often spoke of sickness as a spiritual force, not merely a biological malfunction. In his sermons, he described illness as an invasion that Christ had already defeated. When someone was healed, Coe framed it as a visible defeat of darkness. This language electrified his supporters, who felt they were witnessing spiritual warfare in real time. However, the same language alarmed medical professionals and cautious pastors. They worried about the psychological weight placed on the sick. If healing did not manifest immediately, individuals might feel condemned or spiritually inferior. Coe rejected this criticism, insisting that bold faith required bold risks. In his view, safe religion had failed to many people already. He believed that even the possibility of a miracle was worth the chance of disappointment. As the testimonies multiplied, so did the size of the crowds. Some crusades reportedly attracted tens of thousands over multiple nights. The logistics alone were staggering: massive tents, sound systems, ushers, prayer lines, and follow-up teams. Jack Coe functioned not just as a preacher, but as the center of a growing movement. People began to associate his name directly with miracles. Invitations flooded in from across the United States and beyond. He was living in the momentum of constant expectation. Yet with growth came isolation. Coe's uncompromising style left little room for close accountability. Few dared to challenge him directly, and those who did often found themselves dismissed as unbelieving or fearful. Friends later recalled that he carried the weight of the ministry almost alone. He felt responsible for the faith of thousands and the reputation of the miracle message itself. Any public failure, he believed, would give ammunition to skeptics and silence hope for the suffering. Behind the scenes, exhaustion began to creep in. The emotional highs of miracle services were followed by physical lows. Coe often ignored symptoms of illness, preaching through pain and fatigue. He believed stopping would be a confession of weakness. Ironically, the same faith that empowered his public ministry discouraged personal rest. His body became another battleground where belief and limitation collided. Despite these internal struggles, Jack Coe's influence continued to expand. His meetings inspired other evangelists, some of whom would later become major figures in charismatic Christianity. He helped normalize the expectation of miracles in modern church life, shifting the conversation from if God could heal to why not now. Whether admired or criticized, he could not be ignored. His ministry forced the nation to wrestle with uncomfortable questions about faith, evidence, and the nature of divine power. By the mid-1950s, Jack Coe's ministry had reached a level few evangelists ever attain and fewer survive. The crowds were larger, the expectations higher, and the pressure relentless. To the public, Coe appeared unstoppable, a man aflame with conviction, commanding sickness to flee and daring doubt to show its face. But behind the curtain of miracles and microphones, a quieter, more dangerous battle was unfolding. It was not with critics, courts, or skeptics. It was with his own body and soul. Jack Coe did not believe in slowing down. Rest, to him, felt like retreat. In his theology, momentum mattered. Faith had to stay hot, constantly exercised, constantly declared. The idea of stepping back even temporarily felt like giving the enemy an opening. So he pushed on, preaching night after night, city after city, often ignoring clear signs of physical exhaustion. Friends and associates later recalled that Coe treated fatigue almost as a spiritual weakness, something to be rebuked rather than respected. Ironically, the man who preached divine healing so boldly struggled to apply the same grace to himself. Coe began experiencing recurring health issues, persistent weakness, pain, and symptoms that should have demanded attention, yet he refused to slow his schedule. He continued to travel, to preach, to lay hands on the sick, convinced that the same God who healed others would sustain him. To acknowledge limitation, he feared, might undermine the very message he proclaimed. This internal conflict revealed a deeper tension in Coe's theology. His preaching left little room for human frailty. Faith was certainty, doubt was disobedience. Weakness was something to overcome, not accommodate. While this framework empowered thousands, it left Coe himself with few tools for self-care. He carried the unspoken burden of having to embody his message perfectly. Any personal failure felt like a theological contradiction. As the ministry expanded, so did the emotional weight. Jack Coe was no longer just responsible for sermons. He was responsible for hope. People arrived at his meetings carrying terminal diagnoses, shattered finances, and broken families. They believed he was God's instrument, and Coe believed it too. This sense of divine assignment intensified his urgency. He often spoke as if time were running out, as if every meeting might be his last chance to confront sickness and unbelief. Privately, however, cracks were forming. The constant scrutiny never ceased. Every reported relapse, every failed healing, every critical article felt like a personal attack. Coe internalized these pressures, believing he had to outpreach, outbelieve, and outlast every challenge. Vulnerability did not fit into his public persona. There were no sermons on burnout, no altar calls for exhausted ministers. The fire that drove him forward also consumed him. In 1956, while still in his 30s, Jack Coe's health declined rapidly. Doctors diagnosed him with a severe illness that could no longer be ignored. For a man whose life revolved around public declarations of healing, this moment was profoundly disorienting. Some urged him to rest, others urged him to seek medical treatment quietly. Coe wrestled internally with what it meant to be a healing evangelist who was not healed. Even in illness, he continued to preach. He spoke from beds, from weakened positions, from sheer determination. Those close to him later described a man torn between faith and fear, not fear of death, but fear of disappointing the movement he helped ignite. He worried that his sickness would be used as proof that divine healing was a lie. The irony was painful. The man who told others to never doubt now faced questions no sermon could easily silence. In December 1956, Jack Coe died at just 38 years old. The news shocked the religious world. Supporters mourned deeply, struggling to reconcile his message with his early death. Critics seized the moment, claiming his passing exposed the flaws in his theology. Headlines questioned how a man who preached healing could die so young. The debate that followed was fierce, emotional, and deeply divided. For many followers, Coe's death was not a failure of faith, but a reminder of human limitation. They argued that miracles were real, even if not universal. Others felt betrayed, confused, and spiritually shaken. Some quietly walked away from the healing message altogether. Jack Coe had dared people to doubt, but now doubt knocked loudly on the movement's door. Yet his death did not end his influence. In many ways, it intensified it. His life became a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration at the same time. Preachers debated his legacy, churches re-examined their theology, and believers wrestled with how to hold faith and mortality in the same hands. Coe's story forced a painful but necessary question. Can a message be powerful even if its messenger is imperfect? As we move into the final section, we will examine what remained after the tents were folded and the crowds dispersed. We will explore Jack Coe's lasting legacy, the ministers he inspired, the movement he shaped, and the uncomfortable truths his life still forces the church to confront. This is where the story moves beyond the man and into the impact that continues to echo long after his voice fell silent. When Jack Coe died in December 1956, the tents came down, the microphones went silent, and the crowds slowly dispersed, but the questions he raised refused to fade. His life had been short, intense, and explosive, and his death forced the Christian world to reckon with a complicated legacy. Was Jack Coe a prophet ahead of his time, a flawed vessel used powerfully by God, or a cautionary symbol of unbalanced faith? The truth, as history often reveals, lies in the tension between these extremes. In the immediate aftermath of his death, reactions were deeply polarized. For devoted followers, Coe was a martyr of faith, a man who burned himself out for the gospel and paid the ultimate price. They spoke of him with reverence, recalling the miracles they had witnessed and the hope they had regained under his ministry. To them, his early death did not negate the healings they had seen with their own eyes. If anything, it made his sacrifice feel more profound. He had given everything, even his life, in pursuit of a miracle-working Christianity. Critics, however, felt vindicated. They argued that Coe's death exposed the dangers of absolutist theology and spiritual bravado. To them, his life illustrated what happens when faith is weaponized against human limitation. They warned that his message placed unbearable pressure on the sick and unrealistic expectations on believers. For years, debates raged in Christian publications, pulpits, and private conversations. Jack Coe became a case study in the course of revivalism, pushed to its limits. Yet history has a way of softening sharp judgments and deepening understanding. As decades passed, a more nuanced picture emerged. Many of the evangelists who followed Coe acknowledged his influence openly. He had helped normalize bold prayer, public expectation of miracles, and the idea that Christianity should be visibly powerful rather than quietly symbolic. Even those who disagreed with his methods admitted that he shifted the spiritual atmosphere of his time. He cracked open a door that could never fully be closed again. One of the most enduring aspects of Jack Coe's legacy is the conversation he forced the church to have about faith and balance. His life exposed a dangerous assumption that faith must always look strong, loud, and unyielding. In reacting against doubt, Coe left little room for mystery, suffering, or rest. Later generations of ministers would wrestle with this tension, seeking a faith that is bold without being brittle, confident without being cruel, expectant without being dismissive of human pain. Coe also left behind a generation of believers who learned to expect more from prayer. For people who had been told all their lives to endure sickness silently, His message was revolutionary. He gave language to hope and permission to believe that God could intervene dramatically. Even today, many who pray boldly for a healing trace that confidence directly or indirectly back to the healing revival era Jack Coe helped define. At the same time, his story serves as a sobering warning to leaders. Passion without rest can become self-destruction. Conviction without accountability can harden into isolation. Jack Coe's refusal to slow down, to acknowledge weakness, or to accept help reminds modern ministers that spiritual authority does not cancel human limits. His life challenges leaders to ask not only what they preach, but how they live when the spotlight is off. Perhaps the most haunting part of Coe's legacy is the question his life leaves unanswered. What does faith look like when miracles do not come? Jack Coe taught a generation how to believe aggressively, but not how to wait, grieve, or endure. His ministry was built for victory moments, not prolonged uncertainty. In this way, his story invites the church to mature, not to abandon faith, but to deepen it, to hold both miracle and mystery in the same hands. Yet for all the debate, one fact remains undeniable. Jack Coe believed. He believed fiercely, unapologetically, and completely. He did not hedge his words or protect his reputation. He staked everything on the conviction that Jesus Christ was the same yesterday, today, and forever. In an age increasingly comfortable with cautious religion, Coe's life stands as a disruptive reminder of what radical belief looks like when taken seriously. His famous challenge, "I dare you to doubt," still echoes, not as a command, but as an invitation to examine the foundations of belief. Do we doubt because we are wise, or because we are afraid? Do we soften faith to protect ourselves from disappointment, or do we risk hope knowing it may cost us? Jack Coe's life does not offer easy answers, but it demands honest reflection. In the end, Jack Coe did not conquer death, and he did not live to old age. But he did something arguably just as powerful. He refused to let Christianity become safe. He reminded the world that faith, at its core, is dangerous, demanding, and costly. His tents are gone, but the fire he ignited still flickers wherever people pray boldly, expect God to move, and refuse to settle for a powerless gospel. And perhaps that is his true legacy, not a perfect theology, not an unbroken chain of miracles, but a challenge that still confronts every generation. What if we dared to believe God fully, even when the outcome is uncertain? Jack Coe's life leaves us standing at an uncomfortable crossroads between faith and humanity, power and limitation, courage and cost. He proved that belief can shake systems, challenge sickness, and awaken a generation. But his story also warns us that faith without balance can consume the vessel carrying it. Jack Coe refused safe religion, and whether we admire or question him, we cannot ignore the fire he ignited. His legacy forces us to ask hard questions. What do we believe God can do? What do we expect from prayer? And how do we hold faith when outcomes are uncertain? If this story challenged you, stirred you, or made you think deeper about faith and history, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves deep, thought-provoking Christian stories. And most importantly, drop a comment below. Is Jack Coe a hero of faith, a warning, or both? Let's talk.